Hi, Piotr. I believe you are muted. Welcome. Great to see you.
Hi, Rob.
So, for people who haven't seen one of our earlier conversations, Piotr lives in Tokyo, so we tend to connect at different times of the day. It's Piotr's morning, and
Coffee time.
it's coffee time, and for me, it's the early evening. It's water time right now, um, and so Piotr, we were just speaking a moment ago, and I what I thought would be fun to explore tonight was the way in which you pursue relationships and sort of build your network or build your community, really. Um, uh, I heard a quote years ago that business takes place in a conversation, and I always liked that, and I found that to be a useful concept. And then, as I got to know you, I saw that business takes place in relationships. It takes place in a community, well, both in individual relationships and in community. So I'd love to hear some of your thoughts about, how you see yourself as you connect to new people and maintain relationships with people that you already know.
Sure. So let me give you a number of disconnected thoughts on this. Well, first, I think you're right. Business happens in conversations. It happens in relationships. You cannot do things without people, right? And what's important is a healthy balance between intention and luck. Um, so what I mean is you do need to build intentional relationships, which are helpful to your goals, but also helpful to the goals of the people you build the relationships with. So I always assume an intention in a relationship. It could be said in a different way. I assume a contractual agreement in a
Hmm.
relationship that's going to be maintained over a period of time, meaning uh, I have certain expectations from the person, and the person has certain expectations from me. It could be very clear expectations. They can be stated in a employment contract or a service contract statement of work, for example. They could be stated verbally, or they could be stated non-verbally as well, depending on the nature of the relationship. But it is worth to have clarity as to what to expect from the person and what not to expect from the person. So that's obviously one thing. The other thing is I do try to build relationships with people who have what I don't have, meaning it could be resources, it could be knowledge, it could be energy, it could be philosophy, it could be
Humor.
ideology, humor, it could be anything. Um, Meaning, if I interact with a person, I do want to learn. I don't want
Hmm.
to be stimulated by different opinions and different ideas, different ways of thinking. So
Hmm.
I do have a very diverse pool of friends, acquaintances, partners that I work with. We sometimes disagree on many things,
Hmm.
but we do agree that the relationship should be continuing. So there's an agreement, contractual agreement on continuation and some sort of output. I would say, and I know it sounds very dry, but in reality, if you continue being dissatisfied by a relationship, it's not going to continue.
Hmm. It's interesting as we're speaking. I'm realizing things that I've noticed. Uh, being friends with you for quite a few years now, and yeah, I see the side that you're describing. That, and I think it's nice for you to state it very explicitly that there's something that you're pursuing in the relationship. There's something perhaps that you want or that you want to benefit or enjoy. Um, However, when I've observed you starting a lot of friendships, I believe that it does start in that place of curiosity very often.
Mm.
And maybe because you are such an
Sure.
avid learner. So it's, yeah, if somebody says, okay, I've got a billion-dollar company, that would be a very transactional thing. Like, let me get to know this person. But I see you kind of getting curious about different people and then just almost kind of digging what's under the surface. So I would love to hear about that side a little bit as well.
Well, normally, if someone has a billion-dollar company, they must be interesting in one way or another. I can't tell you that they'll be interesting for longer period of time. Maybe, you know, they have something, but they might not be the most interesting person. Sometimes you meet people who are completely broke, but they are so fascinating that you know, I wouldn't be able to refuse a conversation with them. Now, I think there's something also, if you simplify it to being introvert or extrovert, it's about building trust in the person. So majority of extroverts, they would be paying forward with trust, meaning let's have a conversation, let's see what happens, let's see you know, where it leads us, and then let's see where the results come from, and then build the trust based on those results. Majority of introverts would be going the other way around, where it's about first seeing results, first seeing some sort of proof that you can trust this person, and then building the relationship based on that trust. I've seen that recently in my own business, where you know, two employees had an argument about one thing or another, and actually led to the question of trust. How do you trust this person? The one being an extreme extrovert requires trust. She wants to be trusted first, right? The other being quite an introvert requires results to trust the other person, right? So it's a simple conversation. I don't want to go there, but I think there is a healthy balance between trusting the person and, on the other hand, risk hedging when you interact, especially with a new person. You don't know the repertoire of behaviors and possible risks related to them. I would say that I do pay forward with relationships, so I do try to engage with the person and test the waters as soon as possible. So engaging in topics that might be controversial, engaging in ways of conversing with this person that might be playful, and seeing how the person responds. If they respond in a way that is leading to further growth in the relationship, that is diversified, that is interesting, then I keep investing in the relationship. If the person stops responding, then I pause the button and try to see where they take the conversation to, or, you know, how they behave next. I think it's an experimentation process. So every conversation is an experiment to me, and I do not try to put complete labels on the person at the beginning of the conversation. I try to see how they respond and what's in between us, rather than what's about this person.
Have you always been somebody that meets a lot of new people, or are you more extroverted, or do you experience yourself that way?
I don't know. I think I'm somewhere in between. If you know, believe MBTI tests and whatnot, I'm probably more extrovert than introvert. But I do have a tendency to be interested in the person more than interested in self-disclosure. So I do ask more questions. I do try to focus the conversation on the person than on myself, unless, you know, I have a specific reason, like toothache, talking to the dentist. You know, I'm not going to be interested in his personality. I'm going to be interested in him fixing my toothache. So I think there's a help if you look at humans from the more of a cybernetics perspective of, you know, having a need to engage and a need to withdraw. I have probably quite distinct needs to engage and withdraw, and they're quite big, I think, bigger than probably regular extroverts and regular introverts. So I do tend to engage in very intense ways. So as I said, you know, going into a conversation with a certain amount of curiosity and focusing on the person and engaging the conversation. Sometimes it could be more than I would have liked. So I end up going to a party where maybe I shouldn't have gone, but I do take it sort of moment by moment, and then try to see what can happen in the current moment, rather than looking at my calendar and saying, look, I've got only 5 minutes left and I need to go. Obviously, right. With this conversation, I do have only probably 25 minutes left, and I will need to go to my next meeting. But don't take it personally. On the other hand, I do, when I withdraw, I sometimes withdraw completely, meaning I'm at a party, I'm in a social gathering, and I don't enjoy the conversation. I don't see progress. I can disappear within seconds, and then spend the rest of the night on my own, without really, you know, feeling any regret or any qualms in terms of the social commitment.
And is that something that happens when just the conversation is staying at a very surface level?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes, that's a major problem.
Yeah, because one thing that I've noticed with you over the years that I think is quite unique is that you'll go very, very, very deep with somebody that you've just met. And, you know, and I've seen this again and again, you know, you'll meet somebody and then it's 6 hours later and you know their life story, and it's quite remarkable. And a few friends that I've introduced to you, you know, they come back with reports like of an evening of like, yeah, exactly. So that's kind of interesting, because I do think there's certain social norms that keep people very level. You know, it's like, you know, I won't ask you anything deeper if you don't ask me anything deeper. And as a result, when both people are playing that by those rules, like nothing happens.
Yes. I think it's hard to put it in one politically correct word, but I do not see relationships as a matter of time. So, for example, well, obviously, you know, I grew up in a certain place. I went to a certain school, and I had certain friends at that time. And you know, when I meet them or happen to meet them, I'll be friendly and interested in them. But I don't necessarily think that being born in the same place or going to the same school makes you friends, or that it's mutually beneficial. So what I tend to do is I tend to build my relationships on values and value, I think. So values meaning we may have completely different values, but the values are discovered and they are mutually respected in the conversation, and which leads to a certain value that both of us deliver to each other, meaning it could be a conversation questioning some beliefs or you know, ways of doing things that I might have, but they are questioned in a polite and constructive way. that leads me to rediscovering myself, or vice versa for the person. It might be a conversation where they do have a set of beliefs and values, but they discover that the set is prohibiting them from certain ways of growing or learning. And if they discover the value through the conversation, they continue the conversation. So the relationship continues in a sense. But I might withdraw from relationships that have been long-term just because I don't see values being respected. So for example, I see my values being questioned in a way that is not constructive and doesn't lead to growth or output, right? Or I don't see the person being open to challenge their own values and beliefs in the conversation. And I don't see value coming from the process. So in that aspect, I can end the relationship. I normally don't tell the person, look, I'm not going to meet you ever, and you're a total jerk.
That's it.
That's not the way. I just withdraw from the relationship in a way that is, I think, respectful and in a sense, the person is able to handle it. So, which means, let's say if we go out every week, I might not go out for a month. Maybe I might have a touch point with the person every now and then, but it's not going to be a 3-hour conversation. It might be a
quick
5-minute quick chat, etc. And so the person has access to me. I have access to them, and we both sort of see the value from the short conversation, but it doesn't need to be necessarily a 3-hour deep dive dialogue.
Yeah, and it's it's interesting that you mentioned values, because I think we've shared similar values over the years, certainly a set. But when I reflect on when we first got to be buddies, I think there was such a huge array of shared interests that it was like we always had something to talk about. So, and I'm curious if that's true of many of your relationships. In NLP, we always talk about form versus content, but content is a very powerful thing for people to bond on.
I think yes. I published a book recently where I interviewed 21 people talking about the current paradigm shift. Some of them Japanese, just because I happen to live in Japan. Some of them non-Japanese. Very broad spectrum of people, from entrepreneurs, investors, to educators, art dealers, and so on. And very broad spectrum of what I would call political sort of bias, meaning some of them are very liberal, some of them are more conservative, and so on. But they do have a similar focus on identifying the essential, quintessential problems or questions, and going after them full throttle and solving them, actually. So they do deliver. They are people who I would consider my most successful friends, for example. And I don't really, if I look at the 21 people in the book, I don't have a list or a ranking of who's my best friend and who's not. I might have different depths of relationship with them, just because of our lives and the time available and sort of other priorities. But I wouldn't say I like this person because they are liberal.
You didn't rank them in the book
because they are conservative. I don't really care. I do care that, as I said, we do respectfully question our values and look for the common value in the conversation.
So that's one of your criteria or values, is that the person questions their values and that they're questioning, and certain curiosity.
I think if you put it in a more extreme way, you can say that everything in life is a lie. And if you look at various philosophical approaches, and you probably don't want to go that far into that end, but you could look at social constructivism, or, for example, critical realism, right? So social constructivism assumes that everything that we see, we consume, we interact with is a construct that we've constructed it through our nervous system and through our cultural systems. And maybe on the other spectrum of that is realism, where you assume that everything is reality, that everything is solid and can be measured and can be quantified, right? Now, you could assume a path in the middle, which you could call critical realism, which is, assuming that there is certain reality, right? There are atoms that are solidified into tables and computer screens and so on. But you can be critical towards that reality. You can assume that we have different perceptions. So you can see colors in different ways. You can hear sounds in different depths. People hear something, some people don't hear those things. You could also assume that then the social reality is constructed. So, for example, concepts like trust, like independence, like freedom, they are all social constructs, and they are all in a certain way lies, so that they create realities for us, and if we believe 100% in those realities, we can be successful. But if we believe 125% in those realities, we actually become harmful to other people, which you can see in your country right now, where very different.
Before today.
Yes.
Because we have someone new now, so.
Yes, but it's going to continue. Unfortunately, right. Those social constructs have been very well.
They're embedded.
Yes, embedded and curated, I think, in a way. So you see that there's if we assume, yes, freedom is important, but on the other hand, maybe yes, social support is important, right? So what do you give up? Do you give up freedom for the sake of social sort of coherence and resources? So like in some countries in the world, you have no freedom of speech, but you have social infrastructure, you have jobs, you have everything.
I mean, to
some countries there's the other way.
To a couple things. In speaking to your 21 people that you're ranking by preference, it's not that you're looking to agree with them, right? What I'm getting from you, and tell me if I'm wrong, is more that you're looking for an openness and a willingness to consider ideas and maybe not abandon their own, but at least to consider others. Would that be accurate?
Yes. So there's a concept that I used in this book, which is a German word called aufheben. You might have heard about it. Aufheben means to lift up, to suspend, to sublate. It's a concept that Hegel, the German philosopher, developed in the early 19th century. And what it means is rejecting concepts at one level, but accepting and integrating them at another level. So for example, there's this question about what do you believe is true? Is social support and infrastructure is that essential or is freedom essential, right? And in America, you can be told, yes, you know.
And are they mutually exclusive?
Yes, right. So in America, you have people who are extremely successful and very happy, and they self-actualize. And self-actualization is a very important concept in the culture. Just do it, right? But you have people who don't self-actualize, and they have no social support. In China, you have the other way around, right? Self-actualization is not something that is curated through the culture, but social support and infrastructure and consistency is. And if you have a Chinese person and an American talking, they cannot translate their concepts to each other. They cannot explain them to each other. Now, are they mutually exclusive? They are incommensurable. So you cannot translate one in terms of another, but you can actually, well, maybe not combine, but sort of utilize them both in one space at the next level, meaning, you can create a different doctrine or philosophy that both accepts freedom and social support and social structures, or maybe it rejects both of them, right? So in a sense, this provocation that everything is a lie is my philosophy, where I don't trust, I don't accept things for what they are. It's not a negative mistrust, meaning I cannot trust Rob, so I won't have a conversation, but I'm not going to take everything you say for granted. I'm going to explore and see and experiment with you and see how you behave in different conversations, and what you say and what you don't say, or what you say and what you do. This could be sometimes in some situations very mutually exclusive. And people say that they value one thing, but they actually in reality do things that are opposite to their sort of
right. And to bring it back to your earlier point about trust and your two employees, it's not just the matter of introvert and extrovert. It's that everyone has different evidence for the conditions of trust, so that can be certainly problematic. And even what you're just talking about in terms of what somebody exhibits, what somebody believes does not always align with their behavior, obviously, right? So you may believe you're a gregarious guy, but if your external behavior isn't like that, that certainly won't work. So what I'm hearing from you is you like to test behaviorally, in some way. Yeah.
I think it's healthier to really look at what person does rather than look at what they say, right? Or maybe just to reframe it more correctly, it's healthier to build relationships on the basis of people's behavior rather than on the basis of people's verbal expression, right? So I can tell you I like you, but if I continue stabbing your back and politically destroying you in let's say in an organization, but in front of everyone, I'll continue telling you that I like you and how great you are, right? In the end, you won't be able to trust me. So I think the other way round is actually more constructive, where I actually challenge you in meetings and give you very brutal feedback, but actually support you and help you within the organization and advocate for you positively, right? So which do you prefer as a boss? Do you prefer a boss who says, I like you and you're great, but then doesn't support you and doesn't advocate for you? Or do you prefer a boss who really is brutally honest and very strict with you, but they pick up on every of your strengths and they advocate for you and they support you? I think latter. But unfortunately,
given just those two choices,
Yeah.
perhaps the latter. But I think what I would be interested in is more of a congruence between the two.
It depends on
Um,
your preference.
yeah.
I think some people have a healthy amount of and I'm missing the English word. Jesus, what's the word when you want to be liked?
Like, I don't know the word, but it's people pleasing.
Approval.
Yeah. Approval seeking. Yeah.
Yes, approval seeking.
Yeah.
So let's say if you want to be approved too much, you're going to end up in trouble because you aren't going to avoid the latter type of relationships where you can have a teacher, a manager, a friend, or a family member who are very strict with you, but they do care for you, and you take direct feedback as an offense, and then you end up actually avoiding that direct feedback and sort of swerving into relationships that are easy and sort of superficial but friendly, and so on.
Right.
I think looking at people who are successful, they actually strive for those relationships that are very strict and very genuine, and they take the relationships that are friendly but shallow with a pinch of salt. So in a sense, if you want to sort of, again, cybernetically, if you want to look for ways to succeed in an environment, and you have engagements and withdrawals, you want to engage with people or situations which bring the most outcomes, the best results for the environment yourself, right? And then you want those engagements to be as intensive and as productive as possible. Whereas many people just engage with people for the sake of feeling approved and feeling satisfied with the interaction, right? It's not about being satisfied with the interaction, but it's about being satisfied with the outcome of the interaction. So I prefer to have an argument, a very intense argument with a person, and then actually make a decision that is both useful for both of us, and agree on something at the end of the conversation. And then maybe have a drink and talk about life and whatnot, rather than have a drink and a nice conversation that doesn't lead to any agreement and outcome.
It's interesting. Speaking of disagreeing, I find myself not quite agreeing with your presuppositions about kind of the either or nature of it. I get what you're saying. I get the illustration of if we say, would I rather have honest feedback or somebody who's just going to be my buddy? Faced with those choices, I would probably take the feedback because of my preference. But I don't think it's as two-dimensional as that. I think it has something to do with someone's ability to offer feedback in a constructive way, in a healthy way. And I also think that there's a balance between the so-called the outcome that you're going for, something you use the word productive, like it is, that presupposes that the outcome is more valuable than the relationship in some way. Now, yeah, if you're working inside of a large corporation, that may be the case. Like, I'm just going for we have to be productive. But I think there are many levels to these things. I mean, that's myself. And quite frankly, it's interesting. I don't usually disagree so vehemently, but what I see in your relationships in the business community, what your behavior tells me is actually quite contrary to that. Yeah, you can be a tough critic, but you're not as outcome driven as you're portraying here. Like, I see you much more relationship driven over the years. So it's interesting.
I think, you know, if you look at, for example, you know, I've been, I've worked for many years in various areas around management, right? So organizational behavior, coaching, and so on. So what is management? What is successful engagement between an employee and an organization, for example? It's a relationship, right? It's a process. And if you look at first gains and outcomes, so, you know, I tell you, go and sell and bring me $10,000, right? So that's your revenue target. You're going to probably go and sell and bring me $10,000, but you're going to stop at that point, right? So exactly, you know, this is what you wanted to do. I've delivered it, right? Whereas you can have a very different relationship where we can look at the process of how you sell. You can look at the clients. You can look at the product. You can look at the conversations you have with the client, and we can have regular touch points, maybe daily, maybe weekly, and have a learning conversation about how you're selling. And I can, and you won't be given a target. And maybe one day you're gonna sell $5,000. Then next you're gonna sell probably double as much, and then you're gonna sell more. So in a sense, this is a simple metaphor of, you know, what leads to results. So I think relationships and conversations lead to long-term results and exponential results, right? So I'm not telling I wouldn't agree that I'm not results driven. I'm not maybe in a sense quantitatively results driven. So
yeah, I think you're both. I think you're very much both in what I've seen. Like, I think, you know, there's a part of you that definitely keeps an eye on the ball. Like, you know, this has to happen, or things need to be productive. At the same time, I see you, it's almost like tending a garden of all these different relationships. And that being said, I know that you're coming up on a deadline. So we can continue this because we went around the garden path, as they say. The question I didn't get to ask you was, when you're sitting at home on a given day or an evening, what is it that gets you to go out and connect to somebody, go to a networking event or any sort of event? What's the impulse?
It's interesting. It depends on the day, but I think if I were to find commonalities in those moments, as I said, you know, there's engagement and withdrawal. So if I have a period of time where I'm withdrawing from social interaction, and it doesn't mean necessarily that I'm alone at home, maybe working on a text. It could be having a series of business meetings, one after another, where everything is about results and it's about moving the needle from one point to another. I tend, at the end of the day, I actually tend to crave to have a very different conversation than those results-driven conversations. So have a conversation that is about relationship, is about person, is about you know, maybe getting to know each other, and so on. So this could be a moment where, you know, after a long day, I could go to a bar and have a conversation with a stranger. Or it could be where I reach out to a friend and say, you know, let's have a drink. And it could be a friend that, you know, doesn't have anything to do with my work, but has something that, you know, can contribute to my mental well-being at that moment. Meaning the conversation will help me decompress, I think is the word.
Decompress. Yeah.
Decompress.
Great.
Right.
Well, we'll leave that as the finishing point and maybe as the jumping off point for next time.
Thank you, Rob, and have fun with the rest of your day. I think it's important to strike a balance between results and process.
Yes, absolutely. And you have a wonderful rest of your day, which is just beginning. Thank you.